Okay, so continuing on, this is part 6, hearing and balance. Your ears do more than hear. They also provide you with your body's position relative to gravity and movement, believe it or not. So you got three major regions to your ear: the external ear, which is going to function in hearing. The parts include the auricle, the external auditory meatus, which is the tube, which, if you think back to the skeletal system, you learned the meatus in the temporal bone, and then the tympanic membrane. So you've got the ear out here, which is the auricle. This is the external auditory meatus. There's that temporal bone I was just talking about. And then the tympanic membrane here. So erasing that. The middle ear. The middle ear also functions in hearing exclusively. And its parts include the auditory ossicles, which are the smallest bones in the human body. It's right here from here to here. Here are the ossicles. It's got muscles in there that we're going to talk about. And then it's got something called the round and oval window. The round window is right here. You can see the pointer going to it. It's kind of olive green. The oval window is actually under this big, well, very, very tiny, actually, oval bone. Then you have the inner ear, which is here. Kind of looks like a snail shell with a whole bunch of stuff attached to it. This is hearing, but it's also where we get our balance from. Okay? Inside of this internal area of our ear, from here basically to here, is going to be where you've got your sensory organs that help you to actually hear and help you to balance. Okay. So let's talk external ear. Here's the auricle. Okay, you got your pointer. The auricle can also be called the pinna. Anatomically, it's a fleshy portion of the ear. It's made of elastic cartilage and it's covered by skin. Our ear is very elastic. You can pull on it and manipulate it and it'll pop right back. If you don't believe that it's elastic, look at an old lady's ears who has worn really heavy earrings for years. Her earlobes tend to stretch out because eventually the elastic fibers don't work very well anymore. So physiologically, what does it do? Why do we have it? It collects sound waves and it actually directs them toward the external auditory meatus. It's a funnel. Think about a funnel for a second. You use a funnel to pour something into a bottle. That big, huge bell-shaped area is so that we catch as much as we can to get it into the spigot, right? Well, that's actually what this is doing, except it's doing it with sound waves. If you don't believe me, cup your ear with your hand and see how much louder things sound. The reason that it sounds louder is because your cupped hand is actually extending that funnel bell to kind of catch more. The external auditory meatus is this path right here, okay? Anatomically, it is a tube in the temporal bone. It's lined with hairs and cereminous glands. Cereminous glands are the earwax glands. There is a reason to have those. We have that because we don't want things getting deeper into our ear. If you have sticky on the side of your ear, the wall of your ear, it gets caught in the sticky and it doesn't go any further. That's why we have that. So physiologically, what's the point? Well, like I said, it prevents foreign objects from reaching the tympanic membrane. It basically is a distance things have to travel. And then on top of that, the walls of it are sticky. Even small bugs can get caught in that earwax and not be able to get further into your ear, which is a blessing. Yes, clean your ears. You shouldn't have as much wax as Shrek does to make a candle. But at the same time, don't over clean your ears or you're doing yourself a disservice, because then there's nothing sticky for stuff to stick to prevent from getting further in your ear. So the other thing that this does, just like a regular funnel would that has a spigot, That spigot guides the liquid down into the bottle you're trying to fill. In this case, this spigot guides the sound waves to this little dude right here. Okay, this little dude right here is the tympanic membrane, also known as the eardrum. Now, the eardrum itself is a thin, semi-transparent, three-layered oval membrane. It's actually fairly simple, but how it functions, sound waves hitting this make it vibrate. Anybody who's ever been in band and stood next to a snare drum, when you're talking, you can hear the rattling of the metal underneath that snare drum. The reason that that's happening is because the sound waves that you're making are actually causing the head of that drum to vibrate. And as it vibrates, it causes the rest of the drum to slightly vibrate. It's the same principle. As the sound waves come in, they hit and bounce off of this membrane here, the tympanic membrane. So the middle ear, again, the middle ear is right here. Okay. This is a closer view of that. The middle ear is filled with air. You have three major structures of importance. You've got the windows, both the round and the oval window. These are essential for communication between my middle ear here and my inner ear over here. You've got the auditory ossicles. The auditory ossicles are the three bones that transfer vibrations basically from the tympanic membrane into the inner ear. You've got the malleus, which can also be called the hammer. That is actually attached to the tympanic membrane. So when the tympanic membrane vibrates, this guy is sitting on top of it. It vibrates in turn. Okay, so you've got, let's say that you've got, you've got a balloon and you've got something attached to that balloon. Let's say you've taped, I don't know, a fork to it. If you vibrate that balloon, the fork vibrates too because it's attached. The next thing in line, so this is the hammer, okay, or the malleus. This little dude is called the anvil, okay? You can call it the incus or you can call it the anvil. This is attached to the hammer, okay? So when the hammer vibrates, it actually in turn hits the anvil. So you might be going, okay, hammer, anvil, why? Back in the day when there were blacksmiths, they would work with metal and that metal was extremely hot. So it wasn't like they could put it on a wooden table to bang it out, right? They had to put it on something that wouldn't melt. That was the anvil. If you go back to old Bugs Bunny cartoons, you'll see Wile E. Coyote, super genius, trying to crush the Roadrunner with these anvils. So hammers used to be used to hit these swords so that they could put them in the shape they needed to. Horseshoes so that they could put them into the shape that they needed them to be in. So since the hammer hits the anvil sometimes when you're doing that, they decided to name this the hammer and the anvil. As well, the anvil, which is again here, is attached to the stapes. This little dude right here. The stapes can also be called the stirrup. Why? Because it looks like a stirrup. The stapes' foot right here, this thing that I am highlighting right now, sits on top of the oval window. And if you look, you can actually see that the stapes' base is an oval. That's the shape that it is. So as the hammer hits the incus hits the stapes. So you've got this kind of triple team of things moving. As well, within the middle ear, you have two muscles. You have the tensor tympani and you have the stapedius muscle. The tensor tympani is attached to the malleus. It's attached to the hammer. You can see that right here. Okay, so it's attached there. This actually controls how much tension there is in the tympanic membrane. When sound waves get really, really loud, if that tympanic membrane is pulled really, really tight, it'll actually rupture. That's why you can't take a trumpet to somebody's ear and blow for all you're worth, because you'll rupture their eardrum. So everybody's probably been to a concert of some type, and when you get out of the concert, everybody kind of sounds like this instead of sounding normal. One of the reasons that that is because as the sound waves got bigger and bigger and that tympanic membrane started vibrating harder and harder, your body loosened up that tympanic membrane by relaxing that muscle. And it takes a little bit of time for it to tighten back up, like, okay, we're not going to hear any more loud sounds. Okay, then I'll go on ahead and I'll start tightening up now. It takes about 20-30 minutes for that to happen. So the stapedius muscle is the other muscle we have. And you can see right here that it is attached to the stapes. And it does the same thing. It helps to control how strongly that stapes vibrates. We're talking about the 3 smallest bones in the whole body and the 2 smallest muscles in the whole human body. So when it comes to them vibrating violently, I mean, you could break something. So being able to control how hard these things are moving is actually important. So looking at the inner ear, the picture that you see doesn't really exist. So if you think about an ant farm for a second, the ants burrow out tunnels, but those tunnels are a lack of something, right? They're not filled with anything. There's nothing there so that they can crawl through those tunnels. In the temporal bone, there is this pattern of tunneling that's inside of your ear. But if you fill it and you take it out as like a sample of what you would see, this structure that you see here is what you would see. There are 3 major regions to the inner ear: the cochlea, which is this snail shell right here, the vestibule, which is this kind of bulbed region here, and the semicircular canals, which are these 3 things here. The cochlea is the only one that functions in hearing. The snail shell is the only one that functions exclusively in hearing. The vestibule, this dude right here, functions in static balance. In other words, when you're still, which way does gravity yank on you? If I'm standing up and down, it's going to pull down. If I'm laying flat on my face, it's going to pull forward. If I'm laying on my back, it's going to pull backwards. If I'm laying on my side, it's going to pull to the side. Which way is gravity yanking on you? Not moving, just staying still. That's why we say static, because that's not moving. The semicircular canals, however, these guys here, function in dynamic balance. Which way is your head moving? Now, I do want you to notice something. Here's my round window. Here's my oval window. Okay? The placement of these is really important when it comes to the function of hearing. So, the inner ear, you basically have bone on the outside, like you see here. Then there's a space filled with fluid, which is what you can kind of see there. Then internally, there is a membrane. You see it kind of looks like a purple balloon here that follows the exact same structure. It's just internal to that. And then inside of that balloon, you've got another fluid. So the Boney Labyrinth is a series of tunnels. It's embedded in your temporal bone, like I said. And between that bone and the membranous labyrinth, you've got perilymph, a fluid. Okay, and I'll explain why that's important in a minute. Within the bony labyrinth is the membranous labyrinth. That's the exact same shape, and that membranous labyrinth is filled with endolymph. Okay? Again, I'll explain why the fluid is important in just a minute. So, if I put the stapes down, it would be on top of this here, the scala vestibuli. So here is my membranous labyrinth in purple. Here's my bony labyrinth in this beige color. Okay. So remember we talked about the vibrating happening, how it goes from the malleus to the anvil to the stirrup. Well, as this stirrup foot vibrates, it vibrates on top of this oval that you see here. So imagine a bodyboard in the pool and you start pushing it up and down on the water. What's going to happen? It's going to cause waves, right? So when this pushes up and down in this area, it'll actually cause that fluid to make waves. So let's talk about parts and pieces. And I don't think I explained this real well, but see the cinnamon roll, my snail shell? All I did was I unrolled it. That's what this picture is here. It's the unrolled cinnamon roll. Up at the top, you've got the scala vestibuli filled with perilymph. At the bottom, you've got the scala vestibuli filled with perilymph. In the center here, you've got the cochlear duct, the inside of that purple balloon, and it's filled with endolymph. This membrane right here between my cochlear duct and the scala vestibuli, sorry. Okay, I'm going to still pause for a second.